Right, I'll quickly share my screen and we'll have a little look at what we want to do. So, as people will be aware, we do bang on about our machines being the fastest quite often, but there's not a lot of point in being the fastest machine if you don't have a good workflow for your data to get to that machine. So a lot of our customers are owner users, and majority of the time they will be using the job control software, which we'll have a look at. But as capacity increases, we find more and more that people need other ways to drive these machines, and that's what we're going to have a little look at right now with Alex, who's going to do the driving, and I'm going to do the answering questions. So, should we start with job control and the bits about job control that some of our customers may not realise that they can actually do?
Yeah. So
I'll drop out of here. There we go. On to you.
So at this point, hopefully you've got an understanding of our job control software. But what I will do is I'm just going to very quickly cover the very basics for anyone who doesn't maybe have one of our machines and is just looking at lasers in general. So the way our basic job control platform works, you would have probably seen this throughout the other demos, is it works as a printer driver. That means that you can work directly from whichever kind of CAD or graphics package that you're most comfortable working with. So we're using line colors and shape colors to identify the processes. So as default with the drivers, we have a red hairline for a cut, and then we have black set for engraving. This just works really well if you're working, especially with things like data entry. You don't have to go and adjust the colors each time. So from that point there, we then go to File and we go to Print. And up here we have the laser installed as a printer driver. We can click on our options. We have a little bit about the setup of the machine. We have access to our materials database, to different engraving modes. So as you can see, there's a lot of in-depth and detail things that we can do with this software. And really, that's something that we would really have a separate training session on, but hopefully this gives you an idea of kind of the basic workflow. So you come in here, select your material, click on the print function, and then what that's going to do is it's going to create a file which is sent to something called a spool folder, which we will cover a little bit later. So you can now see at the top of my job queue, we have this file that we just created, and then we would just drag this onto the bed and position it wherever we want to process the job. And of course, if we're connected to a laser, we can then move the head above the material and snap to it. So that's a very quick overview, and hopefully that gives you an idea of the basic workflow of the actual machine itself. So if we just talk quickly a little bit about what we're also seeing on the screen here. So this white area here is the actual bed of the laser. So that's where we easily position the jobs. Over here on the left hand side, we can open up some more information, so we can get things like job timing to give us some calculation. So again, especially on larger jobs, it can be very useful in terms of costing and pricing your work and the actual jobs you're doing. At the top here, again, we have the ability to see which of the materials that we have selected, and you can obviously choose these from the drop down. And for any of our users out there who have our machines, I also sometimes leave this little panel open if I'm doing testing. So this is a preview of the settings you're using, and here you can make quick and easy changes to your setting, but without actually saving it and adjusting it into your materials database. So it's a really quick and useful way if you're doing back-to-back testing. Then I quickly run one job, come back up here, change the number, click run again, and it just allows you to very quickly try and find the actual setting that you want for your material before you save it back into the database. Do you reckon that was a fairly good overview, Brian?
That's nice and brief, and these will be brief overviews. If anybody wants to talk about these things in greater detail and how they can be integrated into their business, then we're all ears and we're very happy to help, but we're keeping these brief. So that's great. That's how generally speaking an owner operator would function with a machine. But if we move it up a stage where we've perhaps got operators who are less skilled, and what we see in a lot of our customers' places is you've got a design team dealing with the jobs that are going to happen, and then an unskilled operator using the machine. How can we make that as straightforward as possible, Alex?
Okay, so we'll cover this in two different ways. The first way is we stick just with job control, and we're going to look at this spool folder file architecture. So what a spool folder is it's an actual folder directory where all of the jobs are sent. So this is at the point where maybe rather than just an owner operator, you actually have a separate graphics department or someone within your company who's doing all of the artwork, and you don't really want them to have to go to the machine at all in order to get the artwork and the files across to there. So if you click on the options button at the top of your job control file, and you come across here, you will see we have a spool path folder. So this is the destination. It's just a folder on the computer where all of the jobs are sent to, and it's what populates this job queue over here on the right hand side. So what this means is if you have this on a shared network, then you can have another copy of your job control software installed on the actual graphic computer, and that can obviously be somewhere else within the company, and they can go file print, and you can click on here to adjust the spool path. So you select it so it's on the same spool path, and that way your graphics department can actually start to send and populate jobs to here, and then all your operator has to do is to come across to here, and then they can select the jobs. Now that's a very useful feature. It's a very useful workflow. But what's even more useful about this is when companies start to grow and have multiple laser machines. So this is where we want to be able to manage the files, all of the jobs between multiple lasers. And again, you can do exactly the same thing. So you can come across to the computer on each of your lasers, and you can actually share the same spool folders. And what that means is you all work off of a common job list. So let me just give an example of this. So I'm going to bring up the spool folder here. So here you can see the folder with all of the files, and this obviously matches the files over here. So let's just take the top job so we can see. So it's the architecture window. So if your operator on this particular machine comes across, gets the file and drags it onto the bed of the laser to run it, then if we bring back up the spool folder, you can now see that that file has disappeared. So what it means is there's no chance of your operators running the same file twice. You just have all of your jobs run to the spool folder, and then all of your operators can run the jobs to the machines to try and get through that work as quickly as possible. And again, you can see if I bring that back in, that reappears back into the job queue there. So it's a really useful feature and a good way to work with the machines if you're looking to just stick with our job control software.
So in the real world, we see this working with companies doing a lot of personalization. So they'll have a team of people collating the personalization that's required, and then literally just pinging those jobs off to the different machines that they have out in the factory, making them exactly like this graphic says.
Yeah, so we've got that single shared spool folder, and then we're sharing them between these three different machines. So again, if you do have any questions, do ask away, and hopefully we'll get a little bit at the time at the end to answer them. So that's good, but there's still obviously some operator involvement. So the next thing I want to have a quick talk about is another separate add-on we can add to your speedy machines, and that's something called UniDrive. So what this is it's a bit of software that allows you to start to automate even more of the process. So what you can do is you can create what's called a hot folder. So it's a folder again on the computer that when you drag your jobs, so your PDFs or DXFs into this folder, it actually automatically also applies all of the material settings. So what you essentially do is say you have 5 products which are on different materials, then you would have 5 different folders, and each of them you drag the job across to it, and it's automatically going to apply the file. So the big benefit about this is you no longer need to have job control installed at all on anyone who's generating your artwork, and then also the actual person who's working with the artwork doesn't have to worry about any of the actual setup details of the machine in terms of applying settings, and neither does the operator. So again, it's taking away more and more of those steps that can cause issues. So let me see if I can bring across the setup window for Unidrive and give an example. So here, what we have are the different settings. So what you do is let me just create a setting. So first of all, you'd pick your material. Then you would pick things like your engraving resolution, depending if you're doing engraving or not, the different half tones, so whether you're doing images or photos. And then once you're happy with all of your setup here, we can then click save. And this is going to create an actual settings file for this particular template. So you might call this your wooden chopping board or whatever you want to call it. And then what we can do is we can then also make a hot folder here. So I'm just going to quickly create a folder on the desktop.
And for anybody, if you can't see this very well because of the way your screen is, if you double click on the screen, you should be able to make it full screen. So you'll be able to see the presentation a bit better.
So just navigate to the desktop where I've just created a new folder. So I've created a folder called chopping board as well. So now whenever I drop a PDF or a file into this chopping board folder, what it's going to do is automatically apply the settings that I've created in here. So it means we're not going to need any intervention at all in order to apply the settings. It's just going to do that all automatically. So let me just see if I can close the presentation for a minute. And then that way we can have a look at what we are doing. So just minimize the millions of screens. Here we've got our chopping board folder. And so now if I just create a PDF, I can now take this PDF. So this is our job or our drawing that your graphics operator would create. This will then, you'll tell them to send it, right, this is for chopping boards. You can also actually automate this through order management systems as well. So you can actually link the different products to different folders. And then when that jumps into there, it automatically detects the file. And I've also got it set. So if we come across to here, we should see the file should appear, unless I obviously have set this incorrectly. Let's have a quick look. 1 second.
So we have a question from David. Says, is Unidrive in job control?
No, so this is a separate piece of software that we'd actually need to install onto your computer, and it would then be set up. So we'd obviously, because it has a slightly different workflow to what most of our customers are used to, it's something that we would then walk you through and show you how to use.
Yeah, it tends to be that we put this into places where it's mass production, lots and lots of variable data, where there could be thousands and thousands of plates going out a day, and every single one's different. And it's not we're trying to take out the requirement for too much graphic capability within that business, because it's simply not what they're about.
Yeah.
Just really to simplify it and take all the user steps, or as many of the user steps, out as possible. So it requires a bit of setup from us, but once it's set up, you're good to go with very little operator interface.
Yeah, and I think the big benefit, obviously, of this kind of workflow is the just the simple and ease of use. That once you've actually got it set up for all of the different settings, then obviously you can just continually work with it, and it's just really useful bit of software. So I'm just going to click on to here, and then let me just quickly, I now have the added fun of having too many screens open.
There's a surprise. That's not like you, Alex.
There we go. And so see the files then appear into our job list, and they also add the auto position box ticked as well, which means you can actually set it up. If you set your artwork the right size, that obviously the job appears in exactly the right place at the same time as well.
So it's very functional. It takes out a lot of the options, so that literally a job arrives, it goes to the same place every time, it uses the same settings every time. So the only variable is the data within that job. Is that a fair assessment, Alex?
Yeah, and you can make it more and more advanced as you go. So depending on obviously your own in-house ability to have order management software, then you can actually even take out the stage of actually having to have the graphics person attach and send the job to the right place. They'll actually go to the job, match the artwork to the job, and then the actual management software will take part of that. So, we see it even with people that only have one machine, but it's also, really beneficial as your business starts to grow.
Bro, any questions on that from those watching? And if not, we will move on to something else. Certainly something that we get asked a lot generally for low quantity or where variable data is not the day-to-day, is how to handle variable data.
Yep, exactly. So I'd say that's probably another one of the biggest kind of applications to people to look for, especially if you're working with anything like a data plate. So that can obviously be the most basic form, but also, as you've already mentioned, with the growing trend of personalization that we're seeing, adding people's names to products, you just want to have all your base artwork set up, and then you just want to be able to bring that in. So you could do this in a lot of different ways. So there is dedicated software out there for it, but I thought we would take you through the way of how you do this with something even basic like Corel Draw.
And that's mainly because a lot of our customers use Corel, don't they? So there are various other software packages that allow you to do this, but Corel is probably our biggest user base, isn't it? So we're focusing on that. Just quickly, we had a question from Joe, just to say his graphics guy is looking to work remotely. Can he access these sessions on YouTube at a later time? Yes, the sessions will remain on the same link that you're on at the minute. You can't search for them yet because they're not listed yet, but they will be in the next couple of days. But this will be live, available as soon as the session's finished, and it'll be time stamped probably by the end of the day, so that your operator can have a little look through and decide where he wants to go.
So what I will do is I'll take you through the workflow on here. So if we go to File and then we go to a function called Print Merge, and then that's what we're going to use to create this. This is kind of the template that you would use to do the basic setup. So you've got your main drawing template all set up here, and then these will be the different fields that you will be populating. So let me just first of all bring up and bring across. So what we're going to do is we're going to import a CSV file. So generally these are it's a fairly standardized format that you can export from Excel or most data management software. And what you essentially want is at the top of these, you'll have the titles. So these will be the different fields for your data. And then under here, you'll then start to populate this with the actual data that you want to use. So again, generally companies who are working with this, maybe you'll be given this data from a third party or another company if you're working business to business, or it can be actually an easier way, just to type and create all of the data. If you do want to do it manually, you can do it this way as well.
Beauty is, of course, if your customer sends you all the data, then any spelling mistakes are not your fault.
You can always try and push the blame.
I wasn't suggesting that I could see spelling mistakes there, Alex, I promise.
So I'm just going to open up this file again so we can start fresh. And then we go to File, Print Merge, and then we go to Create Print Merge. And then in here, we have to select the actual file. And again, you can see, depending on the software you work with, you can work with many different formats, but CSV tends to be a default format to work with. This will then give you a preview of the data that you want to bring in, and then that will bring the data across, and for some reason it likes to stick it right up there in the corner when you have dual screens, which makes it particularly entertaining to try and set up. So over here we have the different fields, and if you were working with this for the first time and you hadn't set up your template, say you're actually building your template, then you can select the fields and insert the field, but basically what it's looking for is the parenthesis setups, having these little things on the edges, and then obviously having the text match up. But the nice thing you can do here is you can then actually start to adjust the different fonts, adjust the different sizing. Do be aware that generally you want to make sure it's set to centering, otherwise when it imports the text it may slightly alter the positioning. And you can see that by doing this you can then start to build up, so obviously you could end up, if you're doing data plates, with 10-15 fields per document. At this point you then click on perform print merge, and what we need to do is we need to make sure that in here you then select and set it so that your area here, your work area, is actually going to match your material size. So this is the amount of material that you're loading into the bed of the actual machine itself. And again, then you'd obviously want to choose your actual material that you want to work with. So we can do this on, say, some anodized. And at this point, we can then click on the print preview step here. So at the moment, what it's going to do is it will print an individual page per item, which depending on your artwork is still quite useful. So especially if you're working with bigger artwork and you want to just populate your job control list with lots of items, you can do it that way. But with something like this, where you're working with smaller items, then you can start to actually tessellate them and start to fill the bed. So this way, it's going to obviously send as many as we can fit, and obviously you can start to go in the other direction as well. It will look at your data list and just keep filling these up to the point that you have in your Excel document. So just click print on there. And then I will bring back across to our job control software. And you can see it's created all of the files here have been sent, and I also still had auto position turned on, which is why it appeared immediately on the bed. But you can see very quick and easy way to import a lot of data, and obviously this was just an example. You might have a complete bed size, full of these different tags which you want to process.
Great, really useful function.
Yeah, and again, there are specialist bits of software out there depending on what you're working with. So maybe if you're looking at barcodes, or just depending on the type of software you want to work with, there are lots of options. And of course,
yeah, again, it's a case of have a chat with us and we'll recommend the right piece of software for you. We deal with most of the graphics packages in one way or another, so yeah, it's all about chat to us and we'll help you out. We've got a question in. Can you see your screen, Alex, or shall I read it out?
I can see. So if we have personalized items over a period of time, how to decide and know where on a sheet of product is still available? I'm not entirely sure I actually understand the question, but in terms of the actual, say for example, you were looking at this, you wanted to make sure you were fulfilling the orders in the correct time, if that's where you're going with, then you can obviously do it by date order, but you can also do date and time here as well. So you can actually see at what time the orders have been coming in and make sure that you're obviously processing them in the correct manner in that way.
So I've read that differently to you, I think. In that I've read it as the physical sheet. So would you have your potentially have your designer have a bed full of product and then populate where hasn't the parts which have not been populated previously?
Oh, in terms of if you're working,
in terms of physically getting the best out of a sheet of material.
So if you're working with a fresh sheet of material, then I would consider obviously again looking at something where you're going to be using nesting. If, however, you're working with a sheet of material where this again is a slightly different workflow completely, but say you've got a big sheet of material, what you can do, say you've run this job, so you know this bit of material is bad, and then you can actually keep bringing on more and more jobs onto the bed and actually leave them on the bed. And then that way, you
Of
know
course.
you're quickly positioning the work into a place which hasn't already been processed. You can actually as well up here go to file and save. So you can then save this whole sheet of material. So you might save this as, say, acrylic sheet 3 or pink or purple, whatever it is you're working with. Bring that back in, and then again keep dragging these jobs on, and then that way you're never going to cut over a bit of material that's already been processed. So when you actually run the job, it will say, do you want to run the new job that you brought on, or do you want to run all the jobs? And of course, you will say you just want to run the new job that you've just brought onto the bed.
And of course, if you're just doing one-offs, then you can manually do that process using the red dot pointer and point and shoot. So you just bring the red dot pointer to a free piece of material and drag your job and snap it to our red dot pointer. At which point you're going to be clear. I hope we've answered your question there. We've got no name; it just says YouTube user. So you will be from now on known as YouTube user.
If like that, it will be one of our colleagues. So we'll then move on to the final topic, which is going to be Ruby.
So let's have a quick overview of Ruby. Ruby is our own laser processing software. It's still relatively new, but we've got a lot of people working on it, and the functionality and features are increasing almost daily. We get new information on how Ruby's progressing. So what Alex is going to do is show you some of the things that are really good now, but essentially over time it will start to cover all of the things that we've already covered, and the whole idea is this becomes your real job management center. Anyway, Alex.
Yep. So I think we're still quite early in terms of development. We've already got a huge amount of functionality in the software, but it is something that you should really if this we will obviously keep contacting our customers to let you know, but the compatibility and the integration is really going to build. So
and there's free beta downloads already, because we're working with our customer base to integrate the improvements that our customers want and the features that our customers want. So please download a copy and let us know where you think.
yeah, so the great thing about the software is where we are, continually developing it at a very high speed, is if you do use our software, if you click on the little feedback tab here, give us any ideas for improvements and suggestions, that actually goes straight to the software development team that we have, and then they can obviously take that on board with the future development of this. So the big change with this is actually going to be, it's not actually reliant on the web. So, there can be some fears. Obviously, if you're relying on things like the internet, you can have problems obviously in terms of the actual final, the full support and stability of products. But this is really based around kind of working off of a web browser. So the great thing about this is it's going to allow really great accessibility. It's still going to be network compatible, so you're not reliant solely on a strong internet connection or anything like that. You don't have any of those fears, but it gives all of the accessibility that you can still have as well with the internet functionality. So over here, it's now dropped down into 4 different stages. So we've got management, where essentially we're dragging our files sent across here. So Ruby already has all of the hot folder functionality built into here, as well as drag and drop. We then have the design stage, where you can actually then alter the artwork further if you want to do that. We have the preparation, so that's where essentially you're setting up the bed of the machine itself. And then finally you have the produce side. So this is just sending the jobs across there. And another big thing, which I'll just quickly cover, is we also have the ability to have user management. So this is going to develop as we go, but basically it means you can have your main operator or your main user. They can actually then start to create sub-operators, and then as we develop, we're going to introduce the ability to have limited functionality for, if you want someone at the machine whose job is just to, click and drag a job across or work on the bed size. So already, hopefully you can see that we're building in already the structure for something that's going to be really good. So if we go into the management side, and then I will just get a PDF again. Also, this software has the ability to really look at the way we work with files. So anyone who's looked at files, where you can have lots of nodes in them, or they're broken curves and things like that, this software is going to already has the functionality to take those files and actually improve the artwork. So you actually get a better result from the actual machine by working through the actual Ruby software in cases. So in this case, I'm just going to use the drag and drop functionality. So this has now created a file into the storage system. If I then click on the file, you can see it's really taken us across to the next step, so the design side. And here you could then, if you wanted to, do some basic editing or adjustments. So again, you've got the ability to make your adjustments. A big difference in here is also if we have a quick look, let's get rid of this little pop-up. You can see we have just the colors here. So the great thing about this is we're no longer reliant on the actual line thickness, which we were before. So anyone out there who's already using one of our machines and they're using Adobe Illustrator, you can know I generally work with quite thick lines. But when you actually set it to the hairline for your cut path, it can become a little bit more difficult to see. Whereas now you can actually just work with the lines set nice and thickly, so it's nice and easy to draw, export your PDF and just bring it into here. And then you don't have to worry about any of the changing of the line thicknesses or anything like that. So from this point, we can then come across to prepare. So we can then find our file and we can then bring it onto the bed. You also actually have another ability. So again, if for example, you've had a problem, what we couldn't do before is once the file was sent here, we didn't have the ability to do any further adjustments. Whereas now we can actually resize the file. You can actually change that in there as well. We can also, if you have, say, multiple files like so, we also have the ability over here in the processing rules, we can actually skip over overlapping lines. And again, I'm sure if you've ever worked with customer files, you can often find maybe they've got hidden layers and things that start to cause all kinds of issues, and this will automatically ignore those. You can actually come back up here as well. And again, quickly, if you then need to make a quick little change to the file, you can do that, click update, and then it's actually updated just that job there. So you've not ruined your original job. It's just for your quick change on there as well. Again, of course, we have all of our material processing database in here. So you can obviously go into your materials database and you can also change all of the print resolution at this point as well. Whereas before, if you were changing your print resolution, you'd have to keep going back to your drawing software. Now we can actually do it here just before we run the laser. So the workflow is already improved quite a lot. We can then click push to laser and then that will send it across into your job queue. So hopefully that's given you a quick little overview of the basics in terms of the actual workflow, so the 4 stages. What I'd really recommend is if you are interested in this, you do actually install it currently alongside job control. So that doesn't mean that you're completely reliant on either using Ruby or job control. It does allow you to have, if you get a little bit of time in your day, you want to have a little practice or a test with it, then you can switch between the modes on that same computer.
Yeah, and we've already found customers who've got job control and have new customers who've got job control and they've switched to Ruby because it's got a really good functionality for them. There was one customer in particular whose files were coming in full of nodes from a customer, and simply just clicking it through Ruby deleted all those nodes and gave them much smoother cutting and much quicker cutting as well. It's amazing what a difference it can make, and this software is only going to get more and more packed with features as time goes on. So we're really excited about this, and we urge you to download it. And I see somebody's put a link in for us, which is great, thank you, of where you can actually go to download the software and start getting used to it, because over time it will become absolutely key for you, packed with features, as I said, multiple times.
Next big update is going to be probably during the summer this year. So definitely if you are still umming and ahhing at the moment, obviously obviously working on your current setup, but really coming the summer, we're going to have, even more functionality where I think it's really going to start coming into its own, especially on this whole remote user side. So you can actually create accounts for, say, your graphics department team, and then that way they can just, open up the browser that will be networked, and then just obviously populate all the jobs, and it's really going to make the workflow really good. And of course, that Mac compatibility as well, because
That's a big one.
they go through here as well. Yeah.
So we're all really excited, and I hope you get the chance to have a look, download it, and give it a try. So, any more questions? We are coming towards the end. What are we? We've got 3 minutes to go before we reintroduce the other guys. Any questions from anybody?
We will find out shortly.
Doesn't look like it. So that's good.
If we've got a minute or two, I'll just quickly bring up so you can see already on here we have the user management side. So the way it works at the moment is you need to have it installed onto your main computer, so the computer that's connected to your laser itself. And from here, you can then add a user. So you would then create a user for your graphics operator. And you can see up here, we then have the ability to allow remote access. So what that means is that it's never going to be possible for someone away from the machine to actually physically start it. Obviously, the safety is safe tool, but it means they can get all the way up to the final stage of having the plate all set up with multiple jobs just before you actually run the final job itself.
So just a couple of comments, Alex. So Paul has said, overlapping line direction, the amount of CAD lines layers I receive which are hidden in Corel and then engraved line turns into a cut line in front of your eyes. A great addition. Absolutely, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say as well that this obviously is just the start. So we're going to see, the potential for full web shop integration. So having your, all of the products automatically come in, generate the artwork. It's really, as this goes over time, it's really going to start to advance very quickly.
Lothian Woodworks, I wish it had worked with a K40. Well, not imminently, but one day. And Phil is.
Yep. So you can also get macros for CorelDRAW. So some of the if double lines are an issue, you can actually install macros that will scan your artwork and obviously go through it and do that. But of course, you can just bring in your PDFs and bring them straight into here.
There you go. Every day's a school day. I had no idea that there was a macro available. Okay, Alex, thank you very much.
I think we've got this. They're going to get stuck with us again this afternoon as well.
We are back together this afternoon where we're going to do some print and cut. But next up we have Johnny and Andrew. So we're back to Dublin and Loughborough. Johnny and Andrew are going to do a comparison in terms of applications and business types for Galvos and plotter systems. So
I think I'll be sticking on to this one as well, because it's always, I have to say, this is a really interesting topic, and it's it's because obviously you've got at such high speed. It's really interesting to see the differences.
It really is. What's actually more productive for your business being the question that we will aim to answer today.